From the castle in Owings Mills, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano joined by Jonas, Shaffer, and Childs Walker here in a special episode on this Tuesday evening. Guys, we're going to break down what we heard from Ravens owner Steve Bisciotti in his press conference, his first outside media press conference in about 4 years. We're also going to talk about what we heard from Eric DeCosta, the first time we've gotten a chance to talk to either of them since John Harbaugh has been fired. All that and much, much more. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsor.
For the fifth year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
All right, guys, it's hardly breaking news, but I feel like we should talk about the top item in the news today in the AFC North, and that is that Mike Tomlin is stepping down as head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The two longest tenured head coaches in the NFL, John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin, are both gone within a week of each other. 19 seasons for Tomlin, 18 for Harbaugh. And we have to hear from owner Steve Bisciotti when the news was broken to him by a reporter. Here was his instant reaction, and don't worry, I've cut out the obscenity.
Like, wouldn't that be awesome? Only if John takes the Pittsburgh job. Wow, wouldn't that be interesting? I don't know, that thing last week maybe disqualified him for my opening after our kicker missed a kick to let them advance. Good for Mike. Yeah, I don't know. Talk to him. I love Mike. I mean, I've admired Mike for 18 years, and that's really shocking that he did it that way. But yeah, that's kind of crazy. Didn't know that. I'll leave that to E. Wow.
All right, guys. First off, it's important to note that national reporters have indicated that the Steelers still hold Mike Tomlin's rights and that the Steelers would probably have to sign off on a trade in order for Mike Tomlin to be hired somewhere else this offseason. But Childs, are we talking about a coach-for-coach swap? Are the Pittsburgh Steelers going to hire John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens are going to hire Mike Tomlin? Is that happening?
Well, of course, wildly fitting that we got the news that Mike Tomlin was stepping down as Steelers coach in the middle of our press conference, listening to Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta talk about John Harbaugh's firing, right?
Do you think Tomlin knew? Do you think he wanted to one-up Steve Bisciotti?
I mean, could it be any other way? I mean, it's NFL poetry. And of course, Steve Bisciotti's off-the-cuff response to that was a wonderful piece of theater, and it told you a little bit about him. I mean, he's part of the joy of getting him up here in these situations is seeing him sort of be off the cuff and informal. That's his style. And it was just sort of fun to see him hit with that in that moment. As for the more serious matter of will Mike Tomlin become a candidate in Baltimore, it's really early to say that. I mean, it's hard to say you wouldn't want to talk to someone of that caliber. I mean, he if he is on the market, if he does want to coach next year, I mean, he goes right up there at the top of this coaching market with John Harbaugh, obviously, who's the belle of the ball in so many cities already. They have such a history together, so many strengths in common. I guess the question to me would be, if the Ravens went down that road, would they essentially see it as saying there was always someone out there who had a lot of the same qualities as our coach, but maybe he's better, right? I mean, like, is that what you want to do? I mean, do you want to sort of sign up for another coach that has so many strengths in common with the person that you just got rid of? Or do you go in another direction? I mean, do you try to do something fresher and sort of change the narrative around your team? I mean, it's a fascinating question to ponder. I mean, who knows, but it would be as tasty a story as you'll find.
Yeah, I feel like, Jonas, you have to at least see if you can talk to him and get his answer as to why he had such great success against John Harbaugh over the course of his career, right?
I guess so. I don't think he would give you any answers that are more informative than what he said over the years about just this series in general. Just like the standard is the standard, and that would be it. I think he would probably be a little bit more in depth in his response there. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think if you're looking to make a move from Pittsburgh, there's a lot of scar tissue there. There's a lot of residual emotions in there, and I would probably be looking just to make a clean break from this division. But yeah, I would say he'd probably be pretty low in my odds on candidates to come to Baltimore.
Although I guess if you're Tomlin, do you maybe say, hey, I could finally have a franchise quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Right. I haven't had that since prime Ben Roethlisberger.
Exactly.
It's been a decade, man. Sign me up.
In the same way that Bill Belichick, toward the end of his tenure, was ruining the fact that he never had a Lamar Jackson type at quarterback to move offense forward, and obviously he's not getting North Carolina.
Probably if you could, bore into Mike Tomlin's soul and ask him, if you had Lamar Jackson a quarterback over the last 8 years with the roster you had in Pittsburgh, do you think you would have won a Super Bowl? He'd probably say yes.
Right. And I tend to think that the answers that he would give Steve Bisciotti off the record might be different, or Eric DeCosta might be different than the answers that he gives to the media, because, obviously he has his Tomlinisms.
I mean, yeah. And I think to a question like that, Giles, he might say, my windshield is bigger than my rear view mirror.
Yeah, sure.
You would have some clever Tomlin aphorism to explain exactly what his perspective on the whole alternate world where Lamar Jackson is as quarterback, as opposed to the incredibly mediocre quarterbacks that he's managed to beat the Ravens with. I mean, good Lord. Aaron Rodgers twice this year. Rookie year Kenny Pickett in Baltimore late in that year. They came close with Duck Hodges in Baltimore, I think, in 2019, right?
Did Mason Rudolph ever beat the
Probably.
Ravens?
Did he? I'm not. I can't remember.
Let's move on.
All right. We only got shots for so long. Let's talk about what the rest of the stuff that we heard from Steve Bisciotti.
Right.
If you were writing the headline for this press conference, what you learned in the over hour-long press conference that we got Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta, what would it be? What was the biggest takeaway? And this is, coming from somebody who has been to several of Steve Bisciotti's media availabilities. This was my first, personally. Jonas, this is a few for you, but as somebody who has covered Steve Bisciotti for a long time, what was your biggest takeaway from what he said today?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is that he has no reservations about Eric DeCosta being the main football decision maker atop this organization, and he has no questions about wanting Lamar Jackson to be his quarterback and be sort of the central player in the organization. I mean, he was asked pretty directly about both of those things and really did not equivocate at all. He referred to Eric DeCosta as an 800 hitter if you look at his decisions overall. I mean, he said, at some other point in the news conference, he said that he doesn't think the Ravens. He sort of basically said he doesn't see a big fix here. I mean, he thinks that whoever takes this job will be coming into a very good situation with a team that can win right away.
He said it's not a tough job.
Not a tough job, right? Yeah. Right. Which is another way of saying that he thinks that Eric DeCosta has given a coach what he needs to win big. And then as far as Lamar Jackson is concerned, he indicated that he thinks that Lamar Jackson might be willing to play ball on an extension similar to the last one he signed. He essentially said, that's what he wants. The ball is in Lamar's court in a lot of ways now, but he presented it as this is my guy going forward. I mean, there was no equivocation about that. So I guess that would be my top line takeaway, even though, as you said, there are a ton of material that we could go through.
Yeah, I mean,
from this hour.
He said he wants Lamar to be his quarterback, is what he said. And he talked about how obviously it's going to take a pay raise from the last contract, but he said, hopefully we'd find a new number and just plug that number into the last contract and just do it over again. I thought that was fascinating. Of course, we knew that the conversation around Lamar was going to be the most interesting and kind of intriguing stuff because Lamar is such an enigma and because we haven't heard from Lamar Jackson since John Harbaugh got fired. And there has been all kinds of speculation about how much of a role he played in John Harbaugh's firing. Steve Bisciotti said Lamar Jackson will have a say, but will have no power in hiring the next head coach, that he can't give any one of his players power in making that decision, that ultimately that decision rests with him. He also said Lamar didn't have an outsized role in John Harbaugh's firing. And he said, Lamar is so non-confrontational. He said, I hear in their conversation before Harbaugh got fired, Bisciotti said Lamar told him, people say I have issues with John Harbaugh. People say I have issues with Todd Monken. That's not the case. I don't have issues with either of them. What did you make of what Steve Bisciotti said about Lamar Jackson's role in all of this, Jonas?
Yeah, I mean, I think he pretty effectively minimized it. I think he acknowledged that the player voices were an important consideration in his decision making, but I think just listening to this presser, I am just kind of reminded of the fact that these owners are at their core, like at their very essence, fans, and they just reach a breaking point with certain things. And the fact that a couple times we had Steve Bisciotti talking about the slow degradation of this team over the years really just kind of, struck a nerve with him. And he reached his own breaking point. He talked late in the presser about how they'd gone from AFC Championship game to divisional round to out of the playoffs. He talked about how he was sick of having a team that was among the league leaders in leads given up. He was frustrated with the lack of development on the players. He talked about just that this was a team that was expected to contend for a Super Bowl and ultimately did not. He led off pretty strong with the case for John Harbaugh, and it was exactly the stuff that you would see if you went to a Ravens fan page, a Ravens message board, a Ravens subreddit.
He said he reads some of the coverage. I'm sorry that neither of you got a mention as
not top two
as Bisciotti's favorite reporters to read. I'm mentioning Jeff Zrebeck and Jameson Hensley, and that's unfortunate. However, I expect that if that list had been expanded to top 5, both of you would have been in there. The 3 big reasons for why John Harbaugh was fired, according to Steve Bisciotti, that stuck out to me: blown fourth quarter leads, players making mistakes in critical situations in playoff games that they rarely make during the regular season, and underachievement relative to their playoff seeding. And I think we could expand playoff seeding to just underachievement year after year in the playoffs.
Well, I think a lack of player development too was another thing. I mean, he was pretty critical of the coaching staff in general, and I think
the scouting staff too.
And the scouting staff, right? And I think he would say, and he really did say, he would not want all of that to be thrown on John. I mean, that he sees that as a much broader failure, but that aspect just wasn't good enough. I mean, he at one point sort of dived in to speak about the offensive line and said, like, look, we expected a couple of those guys to develop and they just didn't develop. And that's on coaching. I mean, so he kind of even went there without being asked directly. So, I mean, that was interesting. But I guess what struck me too is sort of the timeline that he laid out. I mean, a lot of the stories about sort of the inside of what happened have been about, well, nobody in the building thought that John Harbaugh was going to be fired as of, early afternoon on Tuesday. I mean, Steve, to me, sort of shot that narrative down and basically said, this is something I've been thinking about for a month. I first talked to Eric about it, 3 or 4 weeks ago. This was clearly something that was weighing on his mind.
Yeah.
He also said, I mean, he put it in personal terms. He said, look, if I didn't know that John was falling into a really good place, that, he was going to have his choice of jobs going out, it would have been a much harder decision for me. But he said, and ultimately, as it did 18 years ago with Brian Billick, it came down to his gut, and he ended up being very clear on it. And that's what it came down to. It wasn't anybody else's input ultimately. I mean, it sounded like this was something he was wrestling with personally for at least several weeks before it happened. So this was not he changed his mind at the last minute or some last minute. I mean, this was something he was wrestling with inside of himself.
Yeah.
I mean, like the viral quote, one of the viral quotes from this afternoon will be Steve getting asked whether the Ravens would still be holding this press conference had they been a team that made the playoffs and had Tyler Luke made that kick. And Steve Bisciotti said
3 words
for a week.
Right.
John Harbaugh would have been the coach for 1 week longer, maybe 2 if they found a way to draft the Texans.
What if they won the next playoff game?
Well, right. And I mean, look,
that would have been at home.
Well, and obviously if they go on a run like they did in 2012, that changes things. But I mean, that was certainly one of the most striking quotes from the whole thing is, I mean, basically suggesting that, yeah, they beat the Steelers, but then they go out and get waxed by the Texans. We're having the same conversation. It's just pushed a week down the line, right? Which tells you how the gravity of this decision for him and the fact that it was not something he did quickly or lightly.
Yeah. And
I know also that I'm like very, very low on the list of considerations here is the mental health of Tyler Luke, but the fact that they are going this early and this hard and saying this will not be laid at the feet of our rookie kicker, I think is like a good thing to do. Not as important as what exactly the future of Steve Bisciotti's relationship professionally with John Harbaugh, but I think that's something that can't be overlooked when we are kind of writing the retrospective on Tyler Loop's career here in Baltimore, whether it's 1.5 years long or 15 years long.
When I saw some people sort of clipping what he said about Justin Tucker in such a way on the internet to imply that he said that Justin Tucker would have made that kick, and I mean that was not the point that he was trying to make.
Not at all.
I mean he was that whole thing, as you said, Jonas, was about trying to take heat off of Tyler Loop, and DeCosta jumped in at some point and said, "Well, do we know that Justin would have made it?" And I mean that's all semantics, but that was I just wanted to be clear to people that was not what Bisciotti was
yeah,
saying.
and ultimately it's not Bisciotti's decision; it's Eric DeCosta's decision. But Bisciotti did say he believes Tyler Loop will be their kicker next year.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, and they both said he did a great job overall. And now that's going to be a fascinating storyline of the summer. We'll see if they bring in somebody to compete. I mean, I don't think that story's over. But
Right.
yes, they did everything they could to not have the headline be Tyler Loop killed John Harbaugh's time in Baltimore, right? I mean,
Right.
they would no way want that to be the narrative.
Very interesting first 5 words of the headline.
Yeah. In terms of the emotions that it took to get over the firing of John Harbaugh, Steve Bisciotti described the phone call that he had, because this was initially reported by The Athletic, and it was confirmed by Steve Bisciotti that he fired him over the phone, which after 18 years feels a little bit harsh, but he explained that he made the decision when John Harbaugh was driving back from the facility.
Right.
And while he himself was at home.
Yeah. And didn't want to ask him to make the trip back up to
Right.
one winning drive.
That would actually be more awkward, right?
Yes.
More of an indignity.
Yeah. I mean, we've all been through breakups, and, have you ever broken up with anybody over the phone, Jonas?
It's a personal question.
Okay.
I remember like my 7th grade girlfriend calling me very, very nicely over the phone to break up with me. Or maybe it was her friend who called me. I don't know. It was a very, very like precious middle school thing to do.
Were you devastated?
I think I could see the writing on the wall. I'd done very little work in the relationship. I basically asked her out. I basically asked her if she wanted to be my girlfriend, and then did no follow-up work on it whatsoever.
This is the most I've ever learned about Jonas's dating life.
I mean,
in our years of podcasting.
I've been with the same person for 30 years, so I don't even remember these trifling matters.
Well,
I'm old.
Steve Bisciotti did say that the emotion mostly came from him, not from John, and that John actually did a lot of the consoling and took it very professionally and said, "You gave me an opportunity 18 years ago, and I really appreciate that." And honestly, the more I thought about it, initially when I saw that it had been over a phone call, I thought, boy, that's impersonal. That's a tough way to hand somebody the pink slip when you've worked side by side with him. As Steve Bisciotti said, he saw John like a brother, loved him like a brother. That's a tough way to do it. But then you also realize John Harbaugh is going to be fine. John Harbaugh, teams are already lining up to interview John Harbaugh to the point where he is going to get to pick who he gets to talk to. He's already interviewed with the Falcons. There's been a ton of smoke around him with the Giants. So it's not like John Harbaugh is going to be out there and on the unemployment line for a long time here.
No, I was talking to one of our colleagues last week, probably on Thursday, and I mean, I said at that point, if you're John Harbaugh, Tuesday afternoon probably stung a good bit. But if I'm him, I'm waking up on Wednesday morning feeling pretty good.
Yeah, when everyone's calling you.
I mean, because as Steve Bisciotti alluded to, I mean, he took so much heat here in Baltimore, and that was another striking quote. Steve saying, I was angry at the people who were being nasty to my friend and to my coach. But yeah, I mean, to think that John Harbaugh traded in all of that negativity. And he was never again, even if they came back and won next year, he was never again going to be the belle of the ball in Baltimore the way that he is right now on the NFL coaching market. Like,
exactly.
I mean, he's the object of affection for multiple NFL cities right now. So I mean, and Steve sort of said this today. He felt like this ultimately wasn't a bad deal for John. That it was maybe the best thing for both sides. And I think there's a strong argument that that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the details of John's salary or incentive structure here in Baltimore, nor do I know what is being proposed to him by the Giants, Dolphins, Falcons. But I would say it's probably not out of the question that he becomes one of the rare people in the world to be fired from a job stay in that same location and get a raise somewhere else.
And probably have more
CEOs get that a lot, actually.
And probably have more power wherever he goes as well. I mean, he was, I mean, we've written about this. We've talked about it ad nauseum. I mean, the structure here is that the coach and the general manager report independently to Steve, and they're sort of expected to have a collaborative relationship where they're both sort of on the same level in a lot of ways. And like John Harbaugh is probably going to be the man wherever he goes. He's going to be more powerful than the GM. He's going to be more powerful than the quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean, so he's falling into a plum situation.
Yeah. And when you look ahead at now the Ravens search to replace John Harbaugh, of course, Steve Bisciotti, Eric DeCosta answered questions about that too. And boy, they have cast a wide net. I mean, if you are in any way affiliated in the NFL, you've probably gotten an interview to be the Ravens' next head coach. It's up to 15 candidates now, 14?
I think Eric threw out a number out there, right? I think like 15 or 16.
Did you say it specifically? I mean, I think
they have 9 more interviews lined up through Sunday.
And they've done 6, right? Did we hit 6 with
I think 7 or 8
with Flores?
Yeah.
Or is it 7 or 8? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it is a long list. Steve Bisciotti, I believe, indicated that he is not in any of these Zoom meetings, though, because if he had to be in one, he'd have to be in all, and he didn't want to be in all.
Right. And I mean, he alluded to this today. I mean, the way they did it in 2008 was that, he asked his sort of top lieutenants to sort of sift through the wider pool of candidates and give him all the information they could possibly dig up on these guys. Then they narrow it down to a smaller number. They said probably 4 or 5 in this case, who will then come here and essentially spend a day with, people around this building. And I mean, Steve and Eric and Sashi Brown will try to get as good a direct feel for those candidates as possible. But I mean, that tells you we're probably a third of the way into a long, detailed process.
Yeah.
I will say, though, Steve said that he basically realized he didn't want to be a part of this many interviews. A man of his resources and the considerable resources of this facility, I think they could have found a way to make it look like he was in on every one of those Zooms, made an AI, Steve Bisciotti just occupying a Zoom window there, being the silent partner, not really saying anything.
I'm going to quote The Simpsons here. You were too worried about it. I didn't say that you couldn't. I said you shouldn't. Why would you want to do that, Jonas?
I don't know, because maybe he wants to, maybe he's curious about some of these initial interviews, but not the 12 or 15 others.
Yeah. I mean, it's clear that they are trying to get a large pool at first, then narrow it down, then get a lot of the people in front of Steve Bisciotti. And Bisciotti said himself that, he has a lot of faith in his own ability to do this as somebody who made a lot of money in the hiring business. So when he saw people out there in the media saying, you're not going to find anybody better than John Harbaugh, his retort to that would be, well, I found John Harbaugh. Right. So I can go ahead and find somebody new. What did you guys make of, or did you glean anything about what they are really looking for in their next head coach? Because I don't know if we ever really got a solid answer.
Well, Jonas asked that question fairly early in the news conference, and I did think his answer was interesting because I think the point he harped on the most is that they're not going to write off candidates who lost in their first go-around as NFL head coaches. I mean, he said very specifically, some of the people we're talking to were the hot coordinator candidates 6, 7, 8 years ago. Then they went to a place, I don't think he didn't directly say dysfunctional, but I think that's really what he was saying. They went to dysfunctional franchises. Yeah. They didn't win. And he's like, we're going to be able to look at that and say, that's not necessarily a reflection on them as coaches. It might be a reflection on the context. And it's going to be our job. And we have a lot of faith in our ability to do this, to discern, what they did and what happening around them. But I mean, to me, that was the clearest point that he made, is that they're not ruling out people who, maybe right now have a losing record in the NFL. And look, if you go into the deep, dark past of this franchise, I mean, Bill Belichick was the coach of the Browns right before they moved to Baltimore, right? Yeah. I mean, that did not work. And then he comes back to be probably the greatest coach in the history of the league, certainly the greatest coach in the recent history of the league. And so, they're not going to be daunted by some of the things that other people might be daunted by.
Yeah, and I don't think you can in this coaching cycle. I mean, there are so many retreads out there, and there are not a whole lot of exciting new up-and-coming coordinators. I mean, there are a handful, but some of the guys that they've already interviewed or requested to interview, you're talking about,
Vance Joseph.
You're talking about
Kevin
Robert
Stefanski.
Saleh, Kevin Stefanski, Mike McDaniel. So like we're talking about guys who have, in a lot of cases, losing records with, as you said, dysfunctional organizations. Brian Flores, exactly. So yeah, what else did you glean about what they're looking for, Jonas?
Nothing really in specific. We got kind of the cliche response from Eric DeCosta about what he values in a candidate. He said he wants a leader. He said he wants someone who could connect with players. He said he wants some X's and O's value. He wants someone who will kind of inculcate this kind of leadership in the team. Not really a whole lot of direction there. I think they acknowledged, and we all know that this is very, very early days in this process, and it would be very, very premature for them to say that they're leaning one way or the other. Like Steve Bisciotti said, he doesn't really care offense or defense because no matter who is hired, assuming that they don't go with a CEO style coach, the offensive-minded head coach would need to bring in a defensive coordinator who you're at risk of losing if indeed that DC hits. Same way with defensive-minded head coach, you have to bring in your own OC, and at that point, you're at the risk of losing him. I think probably the most surprising thing, and this is probably something that we'll end up quoting if this hire backfires, is the fact that they would give him 4 to 5 years of grace.
6. He said, maybe I'll give this guy 6.
I just don't see that lining up with Steve Bisciotti's, dreams of potentially winning 2 more Super Bowls over this next decade. I know that he said that is kind of the pie in the sky dream for him before he hangs it up and finds a new owner for this team. But he's talked ad nauseum about how we're in this championship window. And he said that signing Lamar would help extend this championship window. And the contract itself is only going to be 5 years. I think at the end of the next 5 years, Lamar will be out of his athletic prime. Who knows what kind of quarterback he will be at that point? He could be the best pocket passer in the NFL like he was, a couple of years ago. But it just seems hard for me to believe that they will have such conviction and such aversion to their own, feelings about a losing season that it wouldn't be a much, much shorter leash.
Well, it's an interesting collision of the timeline that they currently face because of what you just said, sort of the Lamar timeline, the fact that they feel they have a roster that can win now, with the essential nature of this franchise, which is to be patient and stable. And they've had 3 coaches in 30 years, right? I mean, so I think I'd say absolutely take him at his word when he says that he has great faith in his ability to pick someone that will not have us back here in 3 to 4 years, doing this over again. I mean, he firmly believes he will find a coach who will last him 10 or 15 years. Now, you could say, well, every owner believes that. They've all been successful in business magic touch and picking people. Who's to say if maybe he was right once, that doesn't mean he's going to be right again. But I believe that he believes that this is a hire for the long term, and that the Ravens will continue to be the Ravens in nature. I mean, they will be stable. We'll see a lot of familiar places around here. They will be patient. They will ride out, bumps and injuries and et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, I don't doubt that is the way he wants to operate. But Jonas, you raise a very good point. I mean, they are dealing with another conflicting factor of there is an urgency to win right now with the quarterback.
We should also say that Steve Bisciotti did open the door to the Ravens possibly hiring a college coach. We don't know how serious consideration that'll be. We don't know.
Although he did say they didn't reach out to any. He said a few have reached out to them.
Yes, yeah,
and that he would too if he were a college coach dealing with NIL.
I think that is, we tossed off Kurt Cignetti as a pie in the sky name in our last podcast or 2 podcasts ago, and it's like, yeah, this guy's going to be making god tier money, and Marcus Freeman, I'm sure, is getting a salary probably a tier or 2 below him at Notre Dame, but. I mean, you just look at what is happening in the transfer portal, what is happening with NIL. Every single offseason is absolute chaos. You come to the NFL, sure, your failures will be more public, but at least you'll have some semblance of a work-life balance. At least you'll know with some certainty who's going to be your quarterback for the next 3 years, who's going to be your offensive line for the next 2 years. In college, you will become a demigod if you win that national championship game. But as soon as you win that national championship game, you better go back to the college football playoff Final Four within the next 3 years, or then you're probably cooked. I mean, just look at what, how quickly Ed Orgeron burned out at LSU after having one of the greatest college teams of all time.
Yeah, go Tigers. All right, well, we have more conversations to be had, but we do have to get in another quick break here.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
All right, Paul Mancano, Jonas Shaffer, Childs Walker here, reacting to Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta's press conference. We touched on a lot of the headliners. I do want to talk about what Steve Bisciotti had to say about his ownership overall and where he sees it going, because our columnist Kyle Goon did ask him about that. And Kyle put the marker at 15 years. He said, where do you see this going in about 15 years? And Steve Bisciotti said, I'll be 81, Kyle, in 15 years. He has made it clear that he is not going to keep the ownership in the family. But I think based on his comments today, based on the decision to fire John Harbaugh, based on the media at this point last year saying, I don't care about winning, what's going to happen in 30 years. I care about right now and winning championships. It seems like he's acting with maybe a little bit more urgency than he has in years past.
Yeah, it was interesting. He said, I'm now older than Jerry Jones and Bob Kraft were when I bought the team and when I met those guys. He's like those were the guys that I looked up to as sort of the grand old titans of the league when I came in, and I'm now older than they were then. So I mean, he understands where he is in life. Now he certainly gave no indication that he's looking to get out anytime soon. I mean, in the next 5 years or anything like that. I mean, he said his dream scenario is to win 2 Super Bowls in the next 10 years, and then get out when he's 75 after maybe they've had some sort of downturn. He said that might be the pie in the sky scenario. So I mean, that tells you. I mean, he's not thinking it's 2 years and I'm out, or 2 years or bust, but he doesn't think that he's going to be the owner of the team, and he thinks he's owned the team longer than he's going to own the team going forward. Put it
Yes.
that way.
The bulk of his ownership is already passed.
Right. He doesn't see himself being Jerry Jones, 83, still chasing it. I mean,
and it sounds like he really, when he first bought the team, wanted to become as he put it, a gold jacket owner. Like, he wanted to be a Hall of Fame type owner. And then he realized he wanted to put his family first. And we have seen him take a noticeable step back. And it's not just in his interactions with the media, but he acknowledged that he does not have nearly as much of a hands-on, control over this team as he once did.
When he's physically here, less. I mean, he used to be in the building more, and that was certainly one of the interesting takeaways. Probably won't be a headline, but I mean, just in terms of talking about the structure of the front office and how this search is going to go. I mean, he said pretty plainly he wants Eric DeCosta and Sashi Brown to sort of take point on this process, and then he'll come in at the end and make the decision. But that's kind of that was kind of a broader glimpse of how he views the way this franchise has been run in recent years and how he wants it to continue to be run. He's comfortable with that, and it doesn't sound like that's going to change.
Charles, do you think like this simple fact of his proximity and his eagerness to do more virtual work than to actually be here at the castle, and the willingness that Steve signaled to potentially changing the org chart with the next coach potentially not reporting to him and in fact reporting to Eric DeCosta, like, do you think the fact that Steve Bisciotti just won't be around here as much as he was for John Harbaugh could be like the kind of butterfly flapping its wings in Tokyo that leads to a tsunami in New York? Like, could that be something that just fundamentally alters the kind of power structure here for that next coach because of just the kind of, like John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta were right next to each other.
Right.
They literally not just lived like side by side, but they ran into each other by virtue of just how their offices were aligned.
Right. Which was it was that way with John and Ozzie before Eric
and it's intentional.
Took Johnson. Yeah, absolutely intentional. I guess my gut tells me that it's not going to change that much, because I think he also said in the course of today that he doesn't know that he wants Eric to have to deal with the responsibility of having the coach report to him. I mean, so my sense was that still at his core, he wants it to be a collaborative thing where he's the final decision maker at the top, but essentially the coach and Eric and Sashi are all, they're all at the sort of the top of their own pyramids. And I obviously Eric will, and I think he said this today, will be sort of probably play a mentoring role for the new coach, whoever it is, sort of introducing them to the culture of the organization, which obviously Eric has been in for his entire professional career. I mean, but I think it was that way too when John first came in, because he had no ties to the Ravens and he was coming in. And as Steve said today, I mean, Ozzie was this, incredibly accomplished, giant figure in the organization. And, Ozzie both introduced John to the culture of the organization and also graciously had no problem with him coming in and, being an equal in a lot of ways. And, they were going to sort of figure out the roster together. So I guess given the pride that the Ravens have taken in operating that way for so long, I would be pretty surprised if that is just thrown out the window because you have a new coach coming in with a highly experienced GM. I mean, we've seen this before and we saw how they dealt with it. So,
yeah. Any final thoughts from you guys about anything from Steve Bisciotti today or Eric DeCosta? One quick nugget is we should mention that Gianna Hahn asked Eric DeCosta about Nnamdi Madubuike because it has been quite a while since we have heard from Nnamdi Madubuike. We haven't heard from him since his neck injury in week 2. We have been told that at some point Nnamdi will have a conversation or have a press conference or have some kind of announcement for us. And Eric DeCosta once again deferred to Nnamdi at this point, said that it's not really his place to talk, that this is more a conversation for Nnamdi. So we didn't get any answer there. Other than that, was there anything else that kind of stuck out to you guys?
I mean, I did think it was interesting that Steve Bisciotti sort of went out of his way to say that, and I mean, he doesn't tend to dig into the particulars of football that much in his answers, but I mean, he made it very clear that he believed that Madubuike's injury had an enormous domino effect on the entire defense, and that he felt that a number of other players would have been more productive if he had been there. And I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I think
Steve.
we've said and written versions of that throughout the year, but I mean, it does tell you that sort of how they view what went wrong on that side of the ball.
Nnamdi Madubuike, the 5th leading sack man on this team, despite having 74 pass rush snaps. I think I looked it up this morning. I think to add to what Paul said about the context from Nnamdi, we know he was there at the game in week 18. He's talking to some of his defensive linemen, obviously not suited up. He tweeted and then quickly deleted, which I think is becoming Nnamdi's style, a message in late December, which was "Celebrate your journey!" ! I was the first person to retweet that, and then 5 minutes later, it was gone. So we're still figuring things out. It sounded like there were ideas from Nnamdi about what the next step could be, which was an interesting way of phrasing what is something that it seems like would more so be up to the decision makers and the medical staff here and the front office here. Obviously, if he can't play, it's a big problem for the Ravens in terms of personnel. It's a big problem for them in terms of salary cap hit. It doesn't sound like Steve Bisciotti, which is unsurprising at this point, would be open to the idea of trading just like huge amounts of draft capital and allocating a huge amount of salary cap space for a Max Crosby type. As always, I think probably at like 5-year streak now with Eric DeCosta being asked about his willingness to trade draft capital, and that's never been his strategy. And I think right now, with where the Ravens are salary cap wise, needing to re-sign Tyler Linderbaum, needing to reach an agreement with Lamar Jackson, needing to take care of all these second and third level guys, it doesn't sound like there's much of an appetite for Max Crosby unless he comes at an extreme discount, because he's going to be made available to all 31 other teams. I don't think he's going to be. I don't think he's going to come at a discount. So it sounds like they are kind of back to square one, square two with just rebuilding this pass rush, and that's going to be a problem for the next coach to inherit, because everything that the Ravens did pass rush wise after week 2 was basically bottom of the league bad.
And I mean, they did give some hints that they would like to be in free agency, but I don't know that that's a position that you're going to be in any position to address there. So that does not, like, even if they did that, it's not like that solves that problem.
Yeah, exactly. All right. I do want to give a quick update, as quick as I can, on our coaching tracker, because we have
so many of them. How can you be quick? Right?
Yep, that's a great point. We've already talked on this podcast about Robert Saleh, Vance Joseph, Brian Flores, Matt Nagy, Cliff Kingsbury, Davis Webb, Clint Kubiak. We also have mentioned Jesse Minter and Kevin Stefanski, both of whom have now popped up on the Ravens' radar. Kevin Stefanski completed an interview with the Ravens last week, and the Ravens are reportedly requested to interview Jesse Minter. So if you want to hear our takes on all of those guys, you can go back to previous episodes. And of course, Jonas is keeping you updated on thebanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months.
We also forgot last week.
We forgot Anthony Weaver.
Yes.
Former Baltimore Ravens second-round pick, played 7 seasons in Baltimore, former defensive line coach, assistant head coach in Baltimore. He has now interviewed with the Ravens. Last 2 years in Miami, he was the defensive coordinator. Not terrific results. 10th in points per game allowed, 24th in points per game allowed. But he was brought up today by Steve Bisciotti, who said he has a great knowledge of this organization that'll probably help him in the interviews.
Right. But he acknowledged that in the same way that they know a lot about Anthony Weaver and Weaver knows a lot about them, they will be doing everything they can to make the proper handicapping for someone like that in terms of just the value add to a franchise like this and a position like this.
Right. All right. A couple other candidates that have been added to the list. Joe Brady, 36-year-old Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator. Ravens reportedly requested to interview. They can interview after the Bills game this Saturday. Got his start, not his start, but really put his name on the map as the quarterbacks coach for LSU with Joe Burrow. Took Buffalo from 6th in points per game to 2nd in points per game in his first year in 2024 there. They finished 4th in points per game in 2025. Did a lot without great wide receivers, although I will still stump for Keon Coleman. Jonas.
Losing battle, bud.
That might be attractive to the Ravens.
If I were Joe Brady, I would love to get away from Keon Coleman.
Yeah. Nate Scheelhaus, I think that's how you say his name, 35 years old, Rams passing game coordinator. Ravens reportedly request to interview him. 6 years at Iowa State coaching. The experience with Matthew Stafford is what you're looking at here, who had a terrific year in his age 37 season, 46 touchdowns. He has never been a play caller there, so that is a knock against him. Jim Schwartz, 59-year-old defensive coordinator, he is a retread, former Lions head coach from 2009 to 2013 when he went 29-51, then has had stops in Buffalo, Philly, and Cleveland. I am interested, and this will be a conversation with a lot of these guys, that maybe the Ravens are having these conversations with a lot of these guys, not just to look at their head coaching opening, but also when they fill that head coaching job to look at a potential coordinator.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, and Steve Bisciotti said it today. We're hiring 3 people. We're not hiring 1 person. And so I have to think that some of these they see more as coordinator candidates than head coaching candidates.
Yeah, and if Kevin Stefanski comes over, maybe he brings Jim Schwartz, who was his defensive coordinator in Cleveland.
Childs, how would you feel about the Ravens hiring a Mount St. Joe's man?
Well, I mean, I had my wars with Mount St. Joe's in various sports, but I don't think Gilman and Mount St. Joe's that's not the most friction. I mean, it's not your arch rival. It's a rival, but not, wouldn't be like a McDonough guy.
Sure. One more candidate to talk about, Mike McDaniel, 42 years old, former Miami head coach, was just fired recently, will reportedly interview with the Ravens this week, went 35-33, so a winning record with Miami. But the first 2 seasons were awesome. Last 2, not as much. Tua Tagovailoa, his quarterback, regressed over the last couple of years. Whether that's McDaniel's fault, whether that's Tua's fault, whether that's the offensive line's fault, who's to say? He is an excellent run game designer. The idea of him designing runs for Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry is certainly tantalizing. The downside for me is if he gets hired, I will almost certainly mess up Mike McDonald and Mike McDaniel 3 times a podcast.
I mean, to me, he's somebody, if you could get him in as your coordinator, that would be extremely exciting.
Jonas mentioned that on our last podcast.
Yeah, I mean,
he's interviewing for the Lions OC job.
Yeah. And I mean, he has such a good feel for run design, and yet also, the good record with quarterbacks. I mean, we know the creativity. You can only imagine the stuff he might dream up with the pieces he would have to work with here. So that's a pretty exciting concept. I mean, head coach, I feel like he'd have to answer some questions and, convince some of the people here about his ability to sort of like steer the big ship. But just as an offensive mind, I think he's as exciting as anybody who's out there.
I think the Ravens kind of face a difficult, and Bisciotti talked about it, and we talked about it, a difficult quandary here, which is if you fire John Harbaugh and you replace him with somebody who has been a head coach before to less success, how that would look. And it's clear that Bisciotti doesn't really care about that. The idea, I know a lot of Ravens fans saw that the Ravens have interviewed Kevin Stefanski and said, well, why would you fire the more successful head coach in this division and replace him with the less successful head coach in this division? But that's something the Ravens are just going to have to accept because they put one of the top candidates, if not the top candidate, on the market themselves.
Well, and then to me, one of the interesting things to sort of try to figure out in terms of where Steve Bisciotti is at in his mindset and his evolution is, I think when he was replacing Brian Billick, he found it very attractive, the idea of, I'm going to find a coach that maybe everybody doesn't know, but I see qualities in this person. I see greatness in this person where the wider world maybe doesn't. And I think that was my superpower in business. Now I'm going to do it in football. He sort of indicated today that he's not necessarily thinking that way right now, even though they do have some candidates that they're talking to who would sort of fit that description. But maybe this time he would be just as intrigued by sort of discerning the person who wasn't put in the right position to be brilliant in the NFL. And now I can still recognize that person's ability and I can put him in that ideal context. That's a slightly different variant on, I'm going to pluck the,
the next great one,
the hidden gem out. Yeah. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
And maybe, his way of, fulfilling whatever kind of base impulse he has as a man who made his fortune in staffing and hiring is hiring the retread, established big name, but finding that next great young up and coming offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. Maybe it's hiring Vance Joseph and bringing along with him Davis Webb and knowing that, hey, if this really does not go well for me, but the offense is a total smash hit with Davis Webb, then hey, maybe I found my in-house replacement in Davis Webb. Again, that is like way putting the cart before the horse. But I think there are a lot of ways that this could play out where it satisfies the kind of base impulse of Steve Bisciotti to find that next great thing, even if it's not necessarily at the head coaching level.
Right. Well, so many candidates to go through here.
I really hope we get Steve again for after we hire him, because today was just such a joy.
It was, as Kyle Goon said, got our money's worth.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. And he concluded by answering a question about why he hasn't done these more often over the last decade. The last time he did this sort of session here, where he took local reporters' questions, was in 2018. And it was February 2018.
It was interesting, like that he used the phrasing of, I don't only want to talk to you guys after losing seasons, or I don't only want to talk to you guys after winning seasons. Something like he didn't want to face the fire after bad years, like the year that almost got John Harbaugh fired. But he hadn't. This has been a very, very successful run in Ravens history, and we have not gotten the chance to talk to him. So I thought that was in my recollection of what exactly he said, a little bit disingenuous, because there have been plenty of seasons for him to celebrate and for him to get up there and talk about just how close the Ravens were, but he's not availed himself.
Fans were hungry for this, and he is just able and willing to go places in terms of talking about the big picture issues of the franchise that nobody else can go there. I mean, Eric DeCosta has to negotiate with Lamar Jackson. So, he has to still be somewhat careful in how he talks about Lamar Jackson. Steve Bisciotti gave us all sorts of insights today into how they communicate with Lamar Jackson that we simply could not have gotten from anyone else. And to me, that is still the value of having him up there, is that he can give, through us, give fans an insight into how things really work here that no one else can give them. And we got a lot of that today, and it's a big deal.
Among those insights that we did not mention in the first 45 minutes of however long we're going with this podcast, the fact that, I forget if it was Eric who volunteered it or Steve who volunteered it, but the fact that after every single one of these interviews, and there will be a lot of interviews, Eric is texting Lamar what he thinks of the candidate.
Yeah, an important nugget there. Well, in the same way that Steve Bisciotti is able to talk about this team and this franchise in ways that others can't, Childs Walker is able to talk on the Banner Ravens podcast about this team and this franchise in the way that others can't. Childs, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Always a delight.
Childs, I look forward to your retrospective in 10 years after Steve Bisciotti has sold this team for a godly amount of money.
It's going to be awesome. If you haven't read Childs' great work on thebanner.com, you should do so. His story after John Harbaugh was fired, which was posted the very same night, is a fascinating look back at the man who changed the Baltimore Ravens franchise in a lot of ways, in a way because he was able to change himself.
Right.
And I thought that was just a fascinating, awesome piece. Of course, Jonas Shaffer has much more coverage as well. So does Gianna Hahn. So does Kyle Goon. Guys, we'll be back at some point soon, maybe potentially before the Ravens hire their next head coach.
We'll have a coach at some point.
At some point, who knows?
They have to.
We have to. For Childs Walker and Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks so much for tuning in. Like, rate, review, subscribe. Write us a 5-star review on the Banner In Podcast Apple podcast feed, and I'll read it out here on the show. We'll catch you next time.